So
Right.
welcome, Violeta. Please introduce yourself a bit more and I'll give the floor to you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I plan to introduce myself actually in the a presentation that I have. Let me just try to share my screen. Can you see my slides?
Yes,
okay.
We can see it.
And I'm trying to remove this and go to, sorry, so many online meeting tools. I'm not used to working with all of them. Okay, so thank you for having me. My name is Violeta Misheva. I am a data scientist at ABN AMRO. And I have been working as a data scientist for the past 5 years. And I want to share with you some of the difficulties that I encountered in my transition to a data scientist. I hope that some of the tips that I will share would be helpful for you. Of course, I'm aware that everyone who goes into data science has a very different journey. So your journey might look very different than mine, but I think that some general things could apply to different settings and scenarios. So first, a little bit more about me. I am working as a data scientist at ABN AMRO Bank for the past 3.5 years. So ABN AMRO Bank, for those of you who are not based in the Netherlands, is one of the big Dutch banks. I am also working as a facilitator at the LU, where I give workshops to data scientists in data science, and I am passionate about sharing my knowledge in data science, and that's why I have a couple of online courses. Before moving to the bank, I worked as a data science consultant for about 1.5 years. So that was my first industry job, basically, after I finished my academic training. And what I did is I completed a PhD in applied econometrics from Erasmus University, where I worked with data to test different hypotheses and to prove or disprove a causal relationship. So basically, also during my PhD, I worked a lot with data, and I knew that I wanted to transition to an industry job and to leave academia. And I was fortunate enough that at the same time, the term data scientist and the job role of data scientist was becoming popular and getting some traction. So I had to transition, I had to learn new skills to be able to look for and eventually find a job as a data scientist. And because I have also before my PhD, I completed my master's in the Netherlands. I thought that, okay, with education gained in the Netherlands, and I was looking for a job in the Netherlands, I thought that, well, maybe that would give me some advantage and it would make things a bit easier for me. But still, it took me a few months to find my first job. Okay, so before I tell you about some of the difficulties I encountered, you also have to understand where I'm coming from and kind of the skills that you need to have as a data scientist. This is, of course, not an exhaustive list. And some of the skills I already had, some other skills I did not, I did not. So I had to basically, learn them by taking online courses, for example. So for instance, if you want to get a job in data science, you need to have some computer science skills or some coding skills, preferably in some open source language, such as Python or R. So you need to be able to clean and visualize the data, pre-process it, and to do some, at least the beginning, for a junior position, some basic programming. So this is the part that I had to learn basically because I worked a lot during my research with kind of statistical tools, and I had to, really kind of pick up my programming. Statistics and machine learning, this is something that I, at least in my education, I had done quite a lot of. When it comes to that part, you need to, of course, be able to do some basic statistical analysis and hypothesis testing. You need to be able to train various machine learning models, be it forecasting, predicting, clustering, etc. Of course, if you're junior, you don't really have per se a lot of business knowledge. You might have domain knowledge based and depending on, let's say, your previous experience, working experience, or educational experience. But that is also something that you're constantly learning because you might be changing domains, or even if you stay within the same domain. I've been working at a bank for the past 3.5 years. I'm constantly gaining business knowledge as well, because it's a very complex organization and it takes quite a while to learn how the different parts of the bank function. And something that sometimes candidates forget about is soft skills. You need to also be a very good communicator. You need to be able to learn on, well, you need to be able to reflect on what skills you have, what skills you're lacking. And most of all, you need to be curious. You need to be motivated and self-driven. So this is like an overview of skills that you might need to have as a data scientist. And I did not have all of them. I tried to fill in the gaps, but still I encountered a few challenges, as I mentioned, and some of the rejections that I received are some of the following. So as I told you, I was focusing on searching for a job within the Netherlands. So I would get rejections due to language barriers, basically for not speaking fluent Dutch. And I would literally get rejections along the lines of, it's not you, it's us. And I had a couple of companies, smaller companies, who would tell me, yes, you were the best candidate for this position, but we are still a small company. We don't feel kind of comfortable speaking in English because of you. So that's why I prefer to go with someone who speaks Dutch, but come back to us after 6 months after your Dutch has improved. The second type of rejections that I also found very strange is, well, I understand where they're coming from. Basically, it's important to have hands-on programming experience and knowledge with the so mentioned open source tools. But basically, I would get a rejection such as your knowledge of the respective language is theoretical, which I find very strange. How can a knowledge of programming language be theoretical? But what they meant is that I did not, let's say, use R or Python in my research. I took half a year degree to finish certain online courses, and that's where I used it. But apparently that was not enough, at least for that company. So identify what other skills you might be missing and do invest in them. So for example, if you come from computer science, I noticed also from my colleagues who have computer science training, sometimes they might be missing statistics and mathematics or machine learning. Then do invest in learning some of that. Or if you come from mathematical background, statistical background, do invest vice versa in learning some programming. And I would also get rejections because, well, in my case, people would not understand my research or how it helped me be a data scientist. Although I did applied research, I worked with data, it sounded still very social. I did a PhD in applied econometrics, so I worked a lot with data. And people often don't realize that, well, economics and econometrics, they can be social sciences. So when I explained to them what I was testing, what my hypothesis was, that it sounded perhaps sometimes too simple. So if you want to kind of make things easier for yourself, do help, be it recruiters or hiring managers, people that you talk to, kind of connect the dots, because they will not per se understand where you're coming from. It is your task in a way to explain to them how your previous training and education experience, how it is relevant and helping you excel in the position that you're applying for. Well, this is not the end of it. I still had a couple of different rejections. So I had a couple of companies that told me you're overqualified for this job. And after getting a bit more experience with applying for my first job and then for the second job, I kind of realized that basically they oversold the job, or what you need to be doing in the job. So for instance, they might advertise a data scientist who needs to have training in econometrics, but yeah, when you talk to them, at the end, you need to be doing just some data aggregation in Excel. Something way more simplistic than what it sounded at first. And then, unfortunately, do not take things personally, because even if things are going great, if you have, let's say, it happened to me that I would go through a couple of rounds, let's say at the very last stage, I have a really nice feeling about the position and the people in the company, and I have a lot of positive feedback so far. And then all of a sudden they disappear and I hear nothing. So there'll be some inevitable ghosting. Do not take it personally, because very often it's not only, well, it's not about you. There are other factors that matter. They might want to consider how someone might fit best with the rest of the team. There might be some other internal political discussions going on. So there are things, unfortunately, that are out of your control. So do not take it personally. But if I have to kind of summarize these bitter lessons in tips I can share with you, one good news is that it's much easier to get your second job than your first one. So it took me a few months to get my first job, but the second time I was looking for a data science position, it took me literally 2 weeks, and I had a couple of offers and I had option of where I could go. So unfortunately, you will have more choice the more experience you have, but of course you need to you need to start somewhere. And yes, there are, I'm sure that other speakers have shared with you already, or they will share tomorrow, quite a few things that you can do. One thing that I have found useful is to invest in building up a network. So attend meetups, conferences, events, because a recommendation from someone within a company increases your chance of success. I myself, when I was applying for different jobs, even if it's, let's say, very highly competitive position with a lot of applicants, just because someone who works at the company recommended me or sent my CV to the right person, then I would get at least the first interview. Of course, use that wisely, because people are busy. Don't over abuse those basically those privileges. Don't ask for too much. And invest in building a portfolio of projects. So how we can do that? Well, there are various ways. You can pick an open source data from, let's say, a platform like Kaggle, and think about what you want to show there. So do you want to go at work at a specific industry? If you have preferred industry, then try to pick a problem or problems from that domain. If you don't, then go for diversity and pick certain set of problems. For instance, you need to have, let's say, a regression problem. You need to have a classification problem, a supervised learning problem. You need to have some NLP, etc. And most of all, focus on a problem that you care about, that you feel passionate about, be it a hobby or something else. Because if it is something that's also an interest of yours, you are likely to spend more time and effort into it, and it will show. So where to store that? Well, keep your GitHub up to date. So if you don't have an experience as a data scientist, let's say you're entering the data science job market, this is one way to differentiate yourself. If you have, let's say, very solid portfolio of projects, but the portfolio doesn't have to be only Kaggle competitions that you participated in, for example. It could also be contributions that you have done to open source packages. That's something that looks very impressive on your in your portfolio or on your CV. You can also put there other things, not only code. You can put, let's say, presentations, preferably with code if it's possible. If you have, let's say, learned something and then you share it with your classmates or with your network in some way, let's say you gave a workshop or a presentation in a method that you learned, then put it there as well. It might help you, you never know. So this is the end of the slides that I had. And I think I am perfectly on time, and I think we have questions. Oh, we have time for questions.
Well done, perfectly on time, and thank you. We already got some comments in the chat that it's very insightful for people, and I think it's really great for also for people from all over the world to see like the challenges that you face. Like it's always nice to hear that you're not the only one, right? And especially since you're a success story, because you do have a really good job in data science now. So that's a hopeful message. A question that we got from Nutsa is, during your job search, did you focus on the role of data science, or did you use other job names or titles? How did you search for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I mostly focused on data scientist and data analyst because, well, let's say 5 years ago, the first time, or more than 5 years ago, that I was looking for a job, well, there was the term, for instance, machine learning engineer, machine learning scientist did not exist yet. Companies were just coming up with data scientists and data analysts. And I was applying for both because I also completely agree with what the previous speaker said, that very often the different titles might mean something different in different companies. So that's why I was open for various, for both titles, let's say.
And what would you recommend people now? Like if you're searching for, like we talked about it before, that a lot of companies also don't call it data science, or they call it, you know, they do, but they're looking for something else. What would you recommend people to search for?
I would recommend to search for a variety of positions. So data scientist, data analyst, data engineer, machine learning engineer, machine learning scientist. Those would be the first things that I would start with. But of course, there are also within data science itself, there is already split and differentiation in the roles, not only data scientists and data analysts, but we also have, let's say, BI specialists. You're supposed to mostly do reports and dashboards or visualizations. We also have now people who, let's say, focus more on the translation side, on the communication side. So there would be advanced analytics translators or AI translators. So there's really a way bigger diversity of roles there. It also kind of really depends a little bit on what you want to focus, be it on the more technical side, on the soft side, etc.
All right, I think that's really sound advice. We'll move into the part where we talk a bit about your current job, which is what came after your job search. Yes. But for the audience that is here, feel free to ask all of your questions for Violeta, maybe about the the job search or about her current position at ABN. What is it you're currently working on within ABN, the Dutch bank?
Yeah, so of course I can't share too many details, but I can give you an idea on how, in general, how my team works. So I'm fortunate that I'm in a team which has a little bit of a central position or a central role within the bank. And as such, we don't serve only one business line per se. Let's say you work for private banking only, or you work for retail banking or commercial banking. But we serve various business lines whenever, for instance, they need help with resources, or whenever they don't have the capabilities with their own departments. So in a way, we kind of work as internal consultants, which is really nice because you get to see how the various parts of the bank function. You're not always doing the same thing, so it's never boring. And at the same time, we are also trying to have a little bit more of a kind of central role in unifying and making sure that we as a data science community in the bank are working in a similar way. So we also recently started working on so-called capabilities, which are some bigger topics that we think the data science community within the bank should focus on. I myself am very passionate about responsible machine learning overall. So this includes topics such as explainability of machine learning models, ensuring that our models are fair and unbiased, they're not discriminating towards certain subgroups of the population. So I am fortunate that I can focus on that as well in my job. Plus, I have a couple of projects with some business lines as well.
Perfect. I can imagine that you cannot share all the details, but it gives us an idea. I wanted to ask you about how you landed this job, but first we have an off-topic question, which we haven't had the whole session yet, so I do want to point it out. It's from Shivansh, and the question is, I love Violeta's necklace. Which chemical compound is it? And dopamine is mentioned, or serotonin?
Yeah, it's a serotonin. Yes, it's the second guess. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yes, it's a neurotransmitter of happiness.
Oh, great. That is really lovely. There's asking what's the price. Well, we'll talk about that later. Yeah, my on-topic question, how did you land this job and maybe your previous job as well?
Yeah, well, this job, actually, I was headhunted for it. Recruiter contacted me, they found me on LinkedIn. So another tip, if I can share, is that at least in the Netherlands, LinkedIn is quite popular. So keep your LinkedIn profiles up to date. And yeah, I was approached. I had a conversation with the recruiter about the job, and then with the hiring manager. At first, I was kind of skeptical, but after a couple of weeks, I went and continued the conversations. And then I just followed the standard application process, which is working on the use case, doing a presentation for the rest of the team, etc. My first job was a bit more difficult. There, I was definitely not headhunted. I had to always be the one to send applications. I do not keep track of how many applications I sent and how many rejections I got, but from some of the disappointments and rejections that I had before that I shared, you can imagine that there were, a few dozen. So yeah, for this, as I also said, for the first job, it just takes a little bit of luck and a little bit of patience and persistence. And the first job that you land might not be, your dream job, not the job that you see yourself doing in the next 5 years, but just stick with it for a couple of years, because it will be for sure a very valuable learning experience, and it will help you get to the second job, which might be your dream job.
Great. I think that's really good advice. And I think a follow-up question on this that we got from the audience is, would you in general recommend using a recruitment agency to find a job?
Yes, I would. I would, because it really helps in a sense. Well, not all, let's say, job offers are on LinkedIn or on other portals. And it also saves you a little bit of effort of checking on all various jobs posting sites and on LinkedIn, etc. And also when you work with recruiting agencies, let's say there is a posting for a job and there is a recruiting agency helping to hire someone versus an applicant on their own. Sometimes those that are kind of filtered with the recruiting agencies might get a priority because they act a little bit like as a first filter to the number of candidates. But there is unfortunately a lot of, quite a large number of recruiting agencies. So there's also quite a bit of difference in the quality there, which is something that you need to, you need to just try out and see for yourself which is the best fit for you.
Yes, I think so. I think it's in general good to go for specialized companies for sure. But I couldn't agree more. So what is for you, you're working at ABN, which is a large bank and a large corporation. What is for you the biggest challenge in working in that kind of environment?
Right. Well, so it's working in such a big corporation is not for everyone, I think. It can be, okay, so first of all, I expected it to be a little bit too formal, too corporate, expect everyone to, I don't know, wear suits at the office, but fortunately, it's not like that. It is very informal. But one downside of working at such an organization, it's such a big company overall, is that it's difficult to keep track of what's going on. So it's difficult to stay connected with the relevant stakeholders, with the various communities of data scientists and engineers. So, now it's less of a problem because we have done things to improve that, but at least a few years ago, it could be the case that you start working on something, but maybe a couple of years before someone else in the same department or in a different department might have tried already to solve that problem, but they faced certain challenges. And things would, back then at least, not be always documented, or people might have left the company. So there was a little bit lost in translation. So in general, with a big company, the biggest challenge is just making your way around, learning who are the relevant stakeholders, the relevant parties, and just staying connected, staying informed, and just trying to connect all the dots.
Yeah, I think, and that's true for a lot of large corporations, I would say, right?
Yeah.
All right. What do you like most about your job?
Yeah, there are quite a few things that I do like. So as I mentioned, the fact that we get to work with different business lines, so that you're not always not always solving the same problem, but you're not working within the same domain. So for instance, currently I am working with, besides the other initiatives, I'm working with private banking, I'm working with our sort of internal economic research group, among other things. And I do like this diversity. I do like the choice that we have of projects. I do like the fact that we have freedom. We are encouraged and have basically the opportunity to propose topics that are important for us and that we might think are important for the bank. So as I mentioned, I am very passionate about responsible machine learning overall. So that's something that I proposed to my manager. And then I found colleagues who are also passionate about the same thing. And we have a couple of working groups that focus on those topics. and we try to develop basically processes and principles that the whole bank would follow on those topics.
Yeah, I can imagine that's really cool that there's really place for initiative. And that
definitely.
is appreciated. Yeah. And so what is you think one of the most important skills for a data scientist to do well at ABN?
Well, I think that this is not something that would be explicitly relevant for ABN, but in general, if I think about my previous job and other companies that I have observed, of course, it's difficult to say the most important. I'll mention a few things. So, of course, it's important to have solid technical foundation. So no one will know everything. It's difficult to keep up to date with all the new and latest algorithms that come out with the newest programming packages, etc. But you should have a good foundation, at least from technical perspective, because it's much easier to pick up what you don't know already. But it's not only about the technical skills. It's also very important to have, as I also mentioned, soft skills. So being a good communicator, it's really important to be able to explain, especially to non-technical stakeholders, what your solution is like, how it works, how it fails, etc. Because if you can't explain it to them, if they don't trust it, they will never use it. So basically you went through all the trouble of building something kind of for nothing. And it's also really important to be very curious, and to be, to stay motivated, because very often you might, it's a little bit, sometimes working on a data science project reminds me about doing my research back in academia, because you have an idea of how to solve a problem, then you try it, it might not work out, then you need to go back to the drawing board and come up with new approaches that you might want to try out. So it's really important to not give up, to be persistent, but also to be kind of realistic and pragmatic. I see very often, mostly junior data scientists, they're very excited to try the latest state-of-the-art, most complex and sophisticated model, whereas you can just start simple, see if it works. Very often it does, and try to improve upon that incrementally. So yeah, there is not really one skill that's most important, I would say, but it's just the plethora of skills that make a good data scientist.
I'll quickly step in here because I think Christella is having a slight issue with her internet connection. Just following up on some of the questions from the chat, and thanks everyone for interacting so much and staying with us today. It's really, really great to see the interaction. So there's a few questions also about the timeline and how long it might take, especially when you're switching careers. Of course, you also had the PhD before you got started. So do you think at, for example, the age of 36, would you be too late to start, or how long should you plan out if you're making a career switch?
Oh, that's a good question, and also a bit difficult to answer very concretely. So first of all, let me say that it's never too late. And if you want to go to data science, then by all means, please do so. And how long would the switch would be? It really depends on what you have been doing so far, what your experience is, and what exactly you want to do. Because there's a lot of diversity also within data science itself. It really varies what you might need to do from company to company. It also might be that you could do that switch within your own organization, with your own company. So that's something that you might want to look out for. For at least for me, I think that it took me around 6 months to make the transition. from my PhD to data science. So I was completing my PhD and I was taking, at least back then, there were not that many, let's say, online courses and programs. I took the first Coursera data science specialization, and it took me about 6 months to complete. So it really depends on, yeah, what skills and experience you currently have. And, but I expect that it would take, yeah, from 6 months to, and this was 6 months of only or mostly data science / coding skills, right? If you want to go into, I don't know, taking some boot camps into the soft skills part as well, that also takes some time.
Thank you. Thanks for taking over, Lara. I don't know why, but I was kicked out for a second. Thank you, Violeta. One last advice for people who would like to kick off their career in banking, you want to give to the audience?
I think that it doesn't apply only to banking, but to any other industry. Especially if you are just starting, if you're looking for your first job in data science, do not give up. It might be a bit difficult, especially in the current market and the corona crisis, etc. Do not give up. Just be persistent, and yeah, the journey is worth it.